Hey guys, Mustached Tom here to review the video game God of War Ragnarok. This took me a bit of time to get around to, and I'm finally here, and I'm going to break it down between its story and gameplay, because it has both, as much as possible, and to be as objective as possible as well. So after the absolute monolith of its predecessor, God of War, I was definitely very anticipating this follow-up in Ragnarok to see where the team would go from there. And there are quite a bit of more issues with this game in terms of its story, which we'll focus on first, but the gameplay is something I would definitely still recommend you play it, even if you don't find the story as invigorating as the predecessor. But here we are. Anyways, starting off with said story, we once again follow Kratos and Atreus, or Loki as he has come to be known by certain other individuals, are now on the brink of, well, Ragnarok, the end of the world, as it is known in some, certain, or a war that will cause, end of the world shenanigans, as it were. And they get caught in the mix of this, and Atreus is trying his best to help avoid it, and Kratos is, of course, trying to help his son, despite all the odds that start to stack up against them. And along the way, we have a much bigger, vaster cast than the previous game, with Mimir once again accompanying you. We got the two dwarves from the previous game as well. We have Freyr, who becomes a major part of this game, and her role in the previous game, I don't remember it as it ended antagonistically at the end. I do recall that, but I don't recall, like, the setup to it. Anyway, point being is that we also get new introductions to Odin and Thor, our antagonistic group, as well as the young girl at Anya Boya. I forget her name exactly, what it's but whatever. Point being is that we have a little bit more characters to sort of juggle around here, and our story has a lot more going on in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. Now, one of the things that gets involved in this particular story is destiny/fate. Now, I, on my channel, have talked a lot about fate/destiny, and if you haven't been on my channel that recently, I particularly mention it when I talk about one of my favorite animes of all time, Digimon, for an example, and how I think that the word destiny is flung around a little bit too willy-nilly there. Like, they even call them the Digi-destined, to make that point very clear. And destiny definitely has this very bizarre connotation to it. To me, it comes across definitely more negative than positive. That being that once destiny is involved in something, that means that has to be the outcome, that there is no other way. And this plays heavily into the story of Ragnarok. In fact, there is even a scene that's pretty late game where Kratos alone comes across the three fates. This is a mythological sort of thing, but they are able to tell the past, present, and future, essentially, is what their whole gimmick would be. And they're able to predict everything. Kratos and Freya and was there someone else with them? I think it was just those two at the time. Able to predict what they were going to say right as they're saying it, and saying it before they were saying it. So this alludes to destiny being predetermined, as if everything is set in stone. And even what I find very vexing, in particular with Kratos' character, is that he comes to terms with this. He was someone earlier in the game that was like, no, I'm gonna fight Destiny, and then later on he says, no, my time is going to come through this. And that definitely was one of the times I was most annoyed with Kratos, because for the beginning half of the game, I was on his side. I was rooting for his character arc. And instead, it feels like his character was regressing, while Atreus was being pushed a little bit forward here. Now, of course, Atreus, being a still young character, goes through quite a few fumbles and mistakes in his own right. Like, for example, unleashing this mega hellhound that can warp dimensions, as an example. And this does come into play later on, and how he's able to, fix that later on, but the initial mistake is still his to make and make right. Of course, this comes into Odin, Thor's daughter, and I don't remember her name either. Oh man, I just remember she had red hair. And she definitely came across as an individual who was very strong-willed, and definitely would be a daughter of Thor, definitely comes across that really heavily, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, I do want to tackle some of the things that are sort of outlined outside of fate and destiny, that being the aspect of fatherhood, because that does come into play a lot in both regards to, well, Kratos and the main antagonist, that being Odin and his whole family, and again including Thor, who Thor is with, his daughter, and how family units, the hierarchy treats the children of it, of the outcome of any of these given circumstances. And that definitely comes into play, and I do think that that's more effective storytelling rather than going down this whole Destiny route. Now, the other criticism I will hit in regards to the story is that as I mentioned, Freya does play a bigger part in the story. And it is bizarre to me that what feels like what should have been a main quest is reserved to a side quest. This being this whole ordeal where she goes through this whole thing that is directly talking about Odin and this whole marriage thing that they had going on or whatever. And it's reserved as a side quest. And I'm like thinking to myself, why? This is so crucial that I feel like this is like some of the most bizarre reasons to place this as a side quest. Side quest meaning that you don't have to do this quest. And it's like, why would you put that on a place where you can miss it? This is such vital information, I feel like. Now, this is a review, so this is going to be a spoiler review, but hey, the game's been out for a while now, and I don't think... but I'm still saying spoiler review just in case. So, one thing that happens in the story is that you unleash Tyr, the original, well, God of War, or the God of War in this context anyway. And I will say the timeline doesn't make any logical sense. Now, I could be wrong. I've played the game 3 times, so poof, that'd be rough if I am. But there is a back-to-back scene where we see Kratos talking with Tyr and Atreus / Loki talking with Odin. Now, why that's vital to me and important to me is that later on in the game we see that Tyr turns into Odin, and that Tyr has been locked away. The real Tyr, apparently, has been locked away, and that apparently, or maybe not so, it's kind of hard to tell how long Odin has been faking being Tyr. This mystery, or lack thereof, or plot hole, rather, I don't know which it is, because the story doesn't give this enough credence. So I'm gonna lean on the side of plot hole, unfortunately, because I don't know where this fits in, how it could even be conceivably possible that Odin can be with Atreus, but also simultaneously talking to, well, Kratos as Tyr. That timeline just doesn't add up. So, yeah, this definitely feels like it has a lot more gaps in its main story, has side quests that feel like they should be main quests. The writing feels a lot more, and I know there's a lot more writing to this game, but it feels like it's a little bit more all over the place than its predecessor, which I find really bizarre. So unfortunately, in terms of story, I don't think I can give this a relatively high score. I think in terms of story, it's missing quite a few things in terms of where things should be. So I'm actually going to give this a 5 out of 10 in terms of story. I think that there is definitely quite a few gaps in terms of story, and there are definitely some hard-hitting moments, but again, that came from such a bizarre, like, how did this even happen sort of moment, and I'm talking about, and I don't remember the dwarfs' names either. I should have looked those up in terms of all the names, well, whatever. Anyway, the blue one dies, and the other one obviously gets upset, and it's like, okay, so there's definitely a thing going on here, and then, you know, whatever, with Tyr, and then this whole revelation with Tyr happens, and again, it makes no sense. And that's exactly the moment where this death occurs, is in that same sort of time frame. So unfortunately, it's all looped in this long but messy narrative, and I feel like, again, reorganizing certain aspects and giving the player enough vague hints that Thor is Odin, or Tyr is Odin, and Odin is Tyr, or whatever it is, while also simultaneously making sure that the two aren't in a back-to-back scene. That alone kind of ruins your whole gimmick, right? Because as far as I'm aware, Odin does not have the ability to clone himself, as far as I know. Tyr has that ability, apparently, but not Odin. Odin does not have that ability, as far as I know. I could be wrong, but that's nowhere in the game, else in the game. Tyr has that ability, and I know that because I also played Valhalla. Now, the free DLC, that is. So, for Valhalla, the free DLC, I'll also go over this. It is a bigger homage to the previous God of War games, that being God of War 1, 2, and 3. So unfortunately, I can't talk about that too much, as I have not played God of War 1, 2, or 3. So a lot of the stories that they are telling in Valhalla are stories that are going over my head a little bit. And it's sort of just a tell story from Kratos' perspective as they're going through this more Gauntlet-esque type of adventure. Him and Mimir, that is, because Atreus is going off on his own adventure, apparently. And, yeah, it's a nice free DLC, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it really adds that much to the story. I mean, not to the main story. And again, I guess it could bring more light to, again, the previous adventures of Kratos, and I guess I would have had more respect for those games, who knows. But again, I just haven't played them, so again, I can't remark on that idea. So again, for a story game, portion, a 5 out of 10. In terms of gameplay, I still think that the gameplay overall is still as fun as it was in the predecessor. We have your basic combat still here with your axe and your dual blade things, and the addition of the spear this time around, pretty late game weapon. But we have these 3 weapons you can sort of wield around. You have Atreus on your back as your backup. From time to time, you also have Freya. You also have the dwarves, who once in a while join up with you, and you have the other, Atreus or / Loki's girlfriend. That's also something I wanted to mention in the writing, and I don't remember her name again. But like, his attempts at like getting to know this girl are so like, oh, it's just like, okay, it's kind of clear that he kind of has feelings for her, but it doesn't go anywhere. And it's like, yeah, okay, it's not the story's focus, but it's like, I don't know, I think like the ending could have used a little bit of like, oh, they're gonna, they're gonna play off it a little bit more or something. I don't know. It just feels like it was such a waste that there were clearly signs that there were definitely feelings, and I'm not going to say they're friends strictly, because there was an attempt at a handhold. I'm going to say that much. Like, that was definitely alluded to in the story at some point. And, he helps her out as well. She is a character who is like, she also plays off the whole Destiny theme, going back to that, and how she remarks about how, in fact, she's the one who shows Atreus this portrait that ends up being true to a degree, instead of, well, Kratos that ends up being Odin that is in his arms at the end portion of the little moral, and, just, putting the whole Destiny thing to rest to a degree, I guess. While almost simultaneously being like, but it's also Destiny still. Yeah, that's the problem with Destiny. But anyway, getting back to gameplay. So the gameplay, outside of one bug that I encountered, just one where I literally fell through the world, you'll see that one, and I put the bug there in the title so you know which one it is. I fell through the world as I was trying to clear a gap, which is indicated by the little expert prompt above where you can sling over from area to area. I slung up and fell through the world once. So outside of that fun bug, I would still say that the gameplay is extremely solid. It still is as fun as it ever was, and the bug in question was particularly small, so I don't think that it breaks, my score of the overall game, which in terms of gameplay is still a 9 out of 10. I still think that this game is a 9 out of 10 in terms of gameplay. While the story got a lot wonkier this time around, I still think that if you're looking for a fun-ass video game to play, I would still definitely highly recommend God of War Ragnarok. And hey, you get a fresh, additional little Valhalla DLC where you can, test your might and get a little stronger and go through, like, again, this sort of mini gauntlet-esque type of thing. So that's fun. And yeah, the fact that they even gave us free DLC is still gravely appreciated, So yeah, still a high recommend in terms of gameplay. And that's my full review of God of War Ragnarok. If you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out small YouTubers. Second, to my PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And third, to my Discord server, where we join, collab, chill, and do that cool stuff. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.